Was there ever anything like the Bosphorus War? The Earth's mightiest armies pressing Marmara, forcing entry between her mountain passes, to a triangle of land besieged by countless vessels. The sky rains down death, the earth swallows the living, a terrible blizzard heaves men violently into the air. Heads, eyes, torsos, legs, arms, chins, fingers, hands, feet, body parts rain down everywhere. October 1914. It has been 2 months since the assassination of Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The war to end all wars is being waged all across Europe. Advancing German armies were stopped after the Entente victory at Marne. Meanwhile, Central Powers crushed the Russian army in Tannenberg, resulting in a stalemate in all fronts. The Russian Empire, despite its sheer manpower advantage, was still struggling with its war efforts though. Sure, they had the huge masses to send to the front, but they were lacking in weaponry and other supplies. Britain and France had to find a way to support their ally, Russia, if they wanted the Russian bear to strike Germany with its full might. Getting the supplies to Russia was problematic though. The most obvious route, the Baltic Sea, was controlled by the Kaiserliche Marine. They had also the Arctic Way, of course, but the ports there were not large enough to sustain such a supply line. The most viable way at the end, through the Dardanelles. However, the Ottoman Empire had closed the straits to the naval traffic since the start of the war. By the end of 1914, Russia had already requested Great Britain to force its way through the Dardanelles. The front in France at the time was dire though, and Britain had neither the men nor the ship to open another front against a neutral power. British priorities changed when 2 German battleships, escorted by the Ottoman Navy, sailed into the Black Sea and bombarded Russian cities in there. The Ottomans were now officially in the war, and it wouldn't hurt to end this outlived empire. Eventually, Winston Churchill would become the main advocate of punching the Ottoman Empire out of the war. By the end of 1914, Britain and France had brought up a grand fleet of 1 super dreadnought, 28 pre-dreadnoughts, 23 cruisers, and 25 destroyers at Dardanelles. The main objective of this operation was to punch a way through the straits and occupy the Ottoman capital, Constantinople, knocking the empire out of the war, as well as opening the supply routes to Russia. When the British and French navies arrived at the Bosphorus, Russia would land its armies in Constantinople and cleanse it of any remaining resistance. However, the Ottoman side wasn't sitting idle. They were very well aware of the upcoming Entente push through the Dardanelles. The Ottoman government had started fortifying the straits. The first reports coming from the military officials in Gallipoli showed the direness of the Turkish situation. The Ottoman official history had this to write. On mobilization, the fortification and armament of the Dardanelles were very inadequate. Not only were the majority of the guns of the old pattern, with a slow rate of fire and short range, but their ammunition supply was also limited. German army was contacted for weaponry and officers. Although the weaponry didn't come due to lack of supply lines, Germans supported the Ottoman army with a force of 500 that consisted of officers, artillery crews, and engineers, as well as a smuggled plane. And German General Liman von Sanders would command the Ottoman forces in the area. The Dardanelles is 62 kilometers long and is 3.5 kilometers wide on average, with the narrowest part being 1.5 kilometers. The terrain on both sides is very mountainous, thus making the strait very defensible. Ottomans had 14 bastions that were positioned on both sides of the straits and laid 10 lines of sea mines in between. These bastions were outdated and were armed with older artillery pieces. However, their positions on mountain tops gave them a massive advantage nonetheless. Entente battleships were designed to take hits from the sides and had thicker armor there. However, on top they were rather vulnerable. Meanwhile, more land troops were being sent to the straits, Ottoman Fifth Army was transferred to the region from the Caucasian front. Despite the Entente's intentions of ending the war through a naval push with the battleships, the Ottoman government was more worried about a landing. On the other hand, 13 Entente submarines had infiltrated through the straits and started terrorizing the Ottoman supply lines. They would take 60,000 tons of supplies throughout the campaign. 4 of the British submarines would be eventually sunk, and a French submarine would be captured. On 19th of February, the Grand Fleet was ready for the push. The British and French plan was made of 3 phases. In the first phase, the 4 bastions at the entrance of the strait would be silenced. The second phase would include minesweeping operations. In the third and last phase, the Grand Fleet would push its way through the defenses and reach Constantinople. The Entente fleet started moving towards the strait and opened fire on the Ottoman positions from the distance. The outdated Ottoman guns with shorter range failed to respond. They had to refuse to open fire unless the Entente ships were close enough, as the Turkish army was also suffering from a dire ammunition shortage. Their only option was to wait the Entente fire till they got close enough. HMS Triumph moved around and tried to bombard the Ottoman northern bastion from the rear and took Settulbahir and Ertugrul under crossfire. HMS Vengeance got closer to the Orhania bastion to increase effective fire. Ottoman artillery, seeing it enter their range, opened fire on Vengeance, but was silenced as other Allied ships concentrated their fire on Ottoman artillery. After 7.5 hours of bombardment, the ships retreated. There wasn't much damage at the Ottoman fortifications. Orhania and Ertugrul were slightly damaged. Bombardment from distance wasn't effective, as the Ottoman soldiers would simply wait out the bombardment by retreating to trenches behind the bastions. The total Ottoman loss after almost 8 hours of bombardment was only 4 men. The British command decided that it was necessary to take out the guns instead of the forts. The Navy was to move in next morning. 7 minesweepers, escorted by HMS Amethyst, entered the straits with the objective of clearing the mines. The Ottoman artillery opened fire. 3 of the minesweepers were sunk, and the rest retreated. HMS Vengeance landed 50 marines near Kumkale. Marines advanced in stealth and ambushed the artillery crew in the bastion. 4 of the 6 big guns in the bastion were destroyed with dynamite. At the very same time, Irresistible landed another group of 65 marines near Settulbahir and destroyed 5 of the 6 guns in the bastion. Both forces were successfully evacuated by 1545 before Ottoman land units could strike back. Now, with the Ottoman bastions at the entrance silenced, the Grand Fleet was ready for another push. Minesweepers, escorted by HMS Majestic, entered the straits. However, Ottomans had another trick in their sleeve. They had deployed dozens of smaller and mobile field guns in the hills to the south. Ottoman guns opened fire on sweepers. Majestic returned fire, however failed to damage the guns. See, the Ottoman army made use of decoy smokes. These smokes would be created as the artillery fired, making it harder to detect where from. Entente Navy attempted to clear the strait by sending in minesweepers escorted by a few battleships for the next 10 days. But all the attempts ended with similar results, with Ottoman mobile artillery sinking the minesweepers. The bombardment from distance wasn't being effective, and minesweeping operations were being disrupted by Ottoman field guns. British command was encouraged by the success of the former landings. Some 90 marines had gone and did what several battleships couldn't in days. Maybe this was the way to go. On March 4th, 100 marines landed on each side. Marines barely retreated with the naval support and had suffered 20 casualties. Meanwhile, failures of the Navy had strengthened the idea of a landing in Gallipoli among the British command. British Admiral Ian Hamilton had noted that a landing might be necessary to control the straits. Yet, London was firm. Winston Churchill was convinced that the straits could be crossed with using only the Navy. One of his telegrams dated March 9th reads, "I do not understand why minesweeping operations should be interfered with fire, which causes no casualties. This work has to be done, whatever the loss of life and small craft, and the sooner it is done, the better." So far it was apparent that the Entente plan wasn't working. Phase 1, which consisted of silencing the entrance bastions, was semi-successful alright. But Phase 2, which consisted of minesweeping operations, were an utter failure, with no successes. There was only one option left for the Entente: going all in. And that's what they were going to do. The ground fleet was ordered for a major push for 19th. This push would smash through the defenses with brute force and knock the Ottomans out of the war. The British Admiral Ian Hamilton was quite certain of a victory. He had telegrammed that they would be drinking tea in Bosphorus within a mere 14 days. The Turkish command, on the other hand, knew that such a push was coming. They had repaired the bastions, and the morning at the day of a major push, they laid an additional line of mines. Unlike the conventional mine lines, this one was parallel to the shore, where Ottoman command thought would be the maneuver zone of the Entente ships trying to withdraw. At 9:30 in the morning, the Grand Fleet started its advance. The ships were positioned in 4 columns. The first one consisted of the larger ships: Queen Elizabeth, Agamemnon, Lord Nelson, and Inflexible. These massive weapons of destruction could take and give punishment, and were to do the most of the heavy work. The second line was made of French ships: Gaulois, Charlemagne, Bouvet, and Suffren. Third column was again made of British ships: Vengeance, Irresistible, Albion, and Ocean. And this third column was followed by a reserve column made of smaller ships. The first column advanced and started bombarding the bastions. European Hamidiye and European Mecidiye were taken under heavy fire. Ottoman artillery fire was suppressed, and the Turkish artillery crews retreated to their trenches. For 30 minutes, British ships bombarded the Ottoman bastions with no return fire whatsoever. Seeing this, Entente Admiral de Robeck decided it was the time for the next move. Second column was ordered to advance and assist the British ships. The bombardment continued for another hour with the help of the second column. Ottoman guns meanwhile remained silent and waited patiently. At 12:06, Ottomans finally opened fire. Inflexible was hit and a fire started on her deck. Agamemnon and Queen Elizabeth were also taken under heavy fire, but especially Queen Elizabeth's armor was so thick that the Ottoman shells just bounced off. French ships were also under heavy fire. Bouvet and Gaulois suffered from Ottoman shots. However, they were still in the action, and the firefight continued for another hour and 45 minutes. Despite their advantage, it was not long until the Ottoman batteries were silenced again. By 1345, Turkish batteries had ceased fire once again. To capitalize on their gains, Entente command sent in the minesweepers. However, Ottoman artillery was still in the fight. They once again opened fire. Minesweepers were hit and had to stop their operation. Ottoman fire was now concentrated on Inflexible, which was still fighting despite the fire on the deck. French dreadnought Gaulois did not prove as stubborn though. It took a direct hit from an Ottoman gun, cracked, and quickly retreated out of the strait. However, it could not get away. The damage was too severe, and Gaulois, despite his efforts, grounded on an island nearby. Meanwhile, in the strait, Ottoman fire was getting more and more effective. Another French dreadnought, Bouvet, was also under heavy fire and started taking hits. Bouvet began her retreat maneuver. However, it hit a mine laid by the Ottomans that morning and sank in total of 3 minutes. 600 French sailors on board were drowned. Concurrently, Inflexible was taking heavy damage and started to retreat as well. However, she shared the same fate as Bouvet and hit a mine. 30 of the crew died in the explosion, but the rest of them managed to keep the ship afloat for a little longer and retreated, eventually grounding on an island in Aegean. Heavy damage taken by second column, Admiral de Robeck ordered their retreat, and third column's advance. Entente command was still oblivious to the parallel mine line, despite losing 2 ships to the mines. Irresistible hit another mine as it advanced and was immobilized near the shore. HMS Ocean was sent to tow Irresistible to safety. However, the shallow water near the shore made it hard for Ocean to maneuver, and Ocean also hit a mine. The explosion immobilized Ocean as well, and was stranded. After these losses, Admiral de Robeck ordered a retreat and called off the attack. Entente fleet had lost 3 dreadnoughts, and 3 others were damaged severely. Admiral de Robeck wrote that day, "After losing so many ships, I shall obviously myself superseded tomorrow morning." After all, Battle of Dardanelles Straits saw the heaviest British naval loss since the Battle of Trafalgar. Around 700 men were lost against the Turkish loss of 100. After that day, Entente plans about the naval push were cancelled. Yet, the campaign was yet to end. British and French high commands were still optimistic and gave the green light for a massive landing in Gallipoli. The Gallipoli campaign resulted in more than 500 deaths and achieved nothing at the end. After 10 months, 3 weeks and 2 days of this meat grinder of a campaign, Entente armies evacuated Gallipoli.